Egy. Egy. Egy.
különösen elfogultak vagyunk a kedves és okos nők. Megjobban a buta erőszakos nők. Igen, be van. Köszönjük szépen, igen. De ez még vállalható, hogy kimondjuk, hogy a kedves okos nőket. Kell még hozzunk még egy széket? Az awareness meg a consciousness között. Mert az awareness-t azt úgy könnyebben ki lehet mondani, ezt a consciousness-t, pláne ne írni nem olyan egyszerű. Igen? Igen. Milyen?
Tudat.
Hát tudatosság, hát igen. De nagyon közel van ez az awareness meg a consciousness.
Öntudat.
Öntudatra ébredés? Mária miért nem jön ide? Mária, hozzak neked egy széket? Én vagyok a Szlávik János. Mit kérdez? Szlaki Izabella, úgy látjuk, még nem érkezett. Reméljük, hogy jön.
Is this working? No. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's my great honor and privilege to be able to open this this very interesting meeting today. And first of all, I would like to call Maria Shagi here to open up the conference. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Szeretettel üdvözlöm a megjelenteket, külföldi vendégeinket is, és magyar vendégeinket is. Egy nagy eseménynek vagyunk most a szemtanúi, hiszen a 20. évfordulója annak, hogy 20 évvel ezelőtt a Roosevelt téren a teremben, az akadémia termében aláírtuk, és aláírták a tiszteletbeli tagjaink a manifestót. Ez a manifestó, ez egy különleges dokumentum. Az a neve, hogy Kiáltvány a planetáris tudatról. A magyar résztvevőknek ott van a kezében a magyar programnak a végén, az külföldi vendégeinknek pedig ugyancsak az angol programnak a végén a teljes manifestót közöltük. Azért fontos ez az irat, mert mint ahogy Vitányi Ivántól hallottuk, ez az irat a 20. század végnek az egyik legfontosabb dokumentuma, ugyanis azt mondja el nekünk, hogy az emberiségnek milyen irányba kell fejlődnie, a tudatnak milyen irányba kell fejlődnie ahhoz, hogy élhető és fenntartható legyen az életünk ezen a bolygón. egy kicsit szeretnék én most a tudatról beszélni, hiszen ennek az a címe, hogy kiáltvány a planetáris tudatról. Mi az, hogy planetáris tudat? A mi világunk egy globalizált világ, és ehhez a globalizált világhoz egy más tudatra volna szükség, mint amilyen tudattal mi élünk. A jelen tudatunk az egy fragmentált, egy analitikus gondolkodású tudat, amelyik nagyon-nagyon sok hasznot hozott a tudomány számára, a fejlődés számára, a technika számára, és lehetővé tette a világunknak azt a sokszínűségét és azt a fejlettségi szintjét, amelyben élünk most. Ám de ez a tudat nem mindig felel meg azoknak a jelenlegi hatásoknak és követelményeknek, amelynek tulajdonképpen a része vagyunk. Szeretném most az embert ide példaként hozni. Tudjuk nagyon jól, hogy mi, mint emberek, két féltekével gondolkozunk. Egy bal agyféltekével és egy jobb agyféltekével. A bal agyfélteke felelős a mi racionális gondolkozásunkért, a megfogalmazásunkért, az analitikus gondolkozásunkért, mindazt, amit az emberiség elért egészen mostanáig a tudomány fejlődése által, a technika fejlődése által. A jobb agyféltekével gondolkozunk globálisan, komplexen. A jobb agyfélteke az, amelyikkel tulajdonképpen a szívünkkel is tudunk gondolkozni, hogy a jobb agyféltekére hallgatunk. Azáltal, hogy két agyféltekével gondolkozunk tulajdonképpen, azáltal megéljük a polaritást ebben a létben, és meg tudjuk élni az egységet is, de csak abban az esetben, hogyha a két agyfélteke szinkronizációja nagyon magas. A mindennapi létben a két agyfélteke szinkronizációja kb. 35%, ez az, amikor beszélünk, nyitva van a szemünk, gondolkozunk, írunk, és minden ilyet teszünk, és hogyha alszunk éjszaka, vagy pedig nagyon mély meditációban vagyunk, akkor a két agyféltekének a szinkronizációja 95-98%-ot is eléri. Ez teszi lehetővé azt, hogy egy egységet éljünk át, hiszen a két agyféltekének együtt kell dolgoznia. Az egység az, ami a szellemünket, a tudatunkat és az elménket oda vezeti, hogy képesek legyünk nem csak ezen a fragmentált módon gondolkozni, hanem egy egységes módon. Miért fontos ez? Azért fontos, mert a globalizált világunkban mindazokat a problémákat, amelyeket most nem tudunk megoldani, mindazok a problémák, amelyek fájdalommal, amelyek háborúval, amelyek veszekedéssel, agresszióval, egymás ellen való létezéssel vannak, ezeket a problémákat csak úgy tudnánk megoldani, ha másképpen gondolkoznánk. Ezért annyira fontos ez a planetáris tudat kiáltvány, hiszen ez a kiáltvány arra hív fel bennünket, hogy másképpen gondolkozzunk. Úgy gondolkozzunk, ahogy a szívünk diktálja, és úgy gondolkozzunk, mint amikor a két agyfélteke tökéletesen szinkronizálva van, akkor képesek vagyunk arra, hogy nem egymás ellen, nem agresszióval dolgozunk, nem szeparációval, elválasztással, hanem képesek vagyunk az egységben gondolkozni, és ha az egységben gondolkozunk, annak hatalmas előnye van. Gondoljunk arra, hogy mindannyiunkban benne van az életerő, a mozgó életerő. A mozgó életerő, hogyha az a bal agyféltekét szolgálja, akkor annak a következménye az, hogy versengünk egymással, és így tovább, és annak a vége majd valahol előbb-utóbb lehetséges, amit most tapasztalunk, az agresszió, háború, és így tovább. Ha a jobb agyféltekénket szolgálja az életerőnk, akkor a jobb agyfélteke szolgálatában a kooperáció áll. A kooperáció az élet, a kooperáció a lényege a létünknek, hiszen a kooperáció lehetővé teszi, hogy minden élő szervezet koherensen működik, sőt azt is lehetővé teszi, hogy minden élő szervezet be van ágyazva a környezeti, nem csak azokba az energiákban, nem csak azok a fizikai energiamezőkben, amelyeket tapasztalunk, mint a gravitáció vagy az elektromágneses mező, hanem azokban a finom energetikai mezőkben, azokban az információs mezőkben is be vagyunk ágyazva, amelyeket a jelen tudományos eszközökkel még nem nagyon tudunk mérni, bár az új fizika már képes arra, hogy ezeket is bemutassa. Na most, ha ilyen kooperációban élünk, ebben a kooperációban képesek vagyunk a legszélesebb körű kreativitásra. A kooperációnak, a jobb agyféltekés gondolkozásának az eredménye a kreativitás, az egymás megbecsülése, az egymás tisztelete, a szeretet, amit az ifjúság, hogyha ilyen nagy meditációs helyen van az ember, akkor úgy fejezik ki, hogy ugye a szeretet szárnyain, vagy pedig a feltétel nélküli szeretet szárnyain. Ezek ugyan nagy szavak, de kétségkívül benne van mindaz az igazság, amit tulajdonképpen szeretnénk elérni. Ha megnézzük, hogy mi a filozófia fejlődése, és megnézzük azt, hogy mit mondott Hegel, mit mondott Bergson, mit mondott Pierre de Chardin, ezek mind azt mondták, hogy tulajdonképpen az emberiségnek a célja ezen a földön az, hogy elérje a fejlődése során, hogy a tudata elérje azt a szent szellemi színvonalat, amelyet tulajdonképpen minden kultúrában, minden időben másként fogalmaztak meg. És az emberiségnek, a fejlődésének a célja az, hogy keresztül menjünk azokon a fejlődési fázisokon, mint ahogy Hegel mondja például, hogy először is van az a tudatszint, amikor csak arról gondolkozunk, amit érzékelünk, tehát az érzékszerveinkkel érzékelünk, aztán a vallásokon keresztül, a vallásos tapasztalatokon keresztül, a művészeten keresztül eljutunk odáig, hogy megtapasztaljuk azt is, hogy mit tud a Szent Szellem. Ugyanez, ugye, ahogy Bergson kifejezi, aztán ezek a filozófusok mind végigmentek azon, és eljutunk egészen odáig, hogy ahová törekszünk, az egy nagyon szép dolog, és nagyon szükséges. Jelen pillanatban a világ problémáit nem tudjuk másként megoldani, csak úgy, hogyha egy irányba befolyásoljuk a gondolatainkat. Most a manifesto az egy olyan dokumentum, amelyik erre törekszik. Egy pár szót elmondok arról, hogy hogyan keletkezett ez a manifesto. 20 évvel ezelőtt, ugye azt ünnepeljük most, akkor a Budapest Klub 3 éves volt, és az első 3 évben avval töltöttük ugye az időnket, hogy toboroztuk és összehangoltuk a tiszteletbeli tagjainkat, akik között ott volt Menuhin, nagy művészeink és nagy gondolkodóink, nagy vallásvezetőink. Például 96-ban Menuhin 3-szor volt itt Budapesten, 3-szor adott koncertet itt a Budapesti Fesztiválzenekar vezetésével, tehát gyönyörű eseményeink voltak. És akkor Ervin elkészítette ennek a manifestónak a vázlatát, és elment Indiába, és felkereste a Dalai Lámát. A Dalai Lámától kapott 5 percet kihallgatást, ugye 5 percet. És amikor ugye, ott a fordító leültek, és megmutatta Ervin a Dalai Lámának, hogy miről is szól ez a kiáltvány, akkor a Dalai Láma az aznapi összes randevúját félretette, és attól kezdve egészen estig át, több órán át csak ezzel foglalkoztak, hogy még ezt javítsák, kijavítsák. Ennyire érdekes volt a számára, és ide, amikor megérkezett Budapestre 6 lámával, ő volt az első, aki aláírta ezt a manifestót. Most én látom, hogy itt mindenki az órájára néz, tehát szeretném átadni a szót a mi alapítóinknak és a kuratóriumunknak, ugyanis ezek az urak, akik itt kint ülnek, ők azok, akik velünk tettük és csináltuk. Nagyon sok, több mint 200 nemzetközi rendezvényt tartottunk a Budapest Klub égisze alatt. Most arra szeretnénk önöket meghívni, hogy a planetáris kiáltványnak a szellemében dolgozzunk együtt, hogy tulajdonképpen a világon van egy hálózatunk, van 24 Budapest Klubunk mindenütt, és ezt a 24 Budapest Klubnak a munkásságát szeretnénk úgy összehangolni, ahogy ez a szervezetünkben működik, tehát hogy koherensen működjenek ahogy a szervezetünkben minden sejt és minden apró részecske az egészségünk fenntartása érdekében koherensen működik, sőt, hogyha úgy vesszük, hogy teljes mértékben be vagyunk ágyazva ebbe a nagyon finom információs mezőbe, és ebbe a nagyon finom energetikai mezőbe, akkor ezt a szervezetünk érzékeli, ezt nevezzük szuperkoherenciának. Mi azt szeretnénk most itt felajánlani a vendégeinknek, hogy ebben a 2 napban lehetőségünk van arra, hogy a 24 Budapest Klubnak a működését összehangoljuk, és hogy olyan tervezeteket és olyan terveket szőjünk a jövőre nézve, és olyan munkásságban legyünk része, amely mindannyiunkat előre visz, mindannyiunknak boldogságot, mindannyiunknak örömet okoz, és segít abban, hogy a jelenlegi földi problémáinkat is megoldja. Köszönöm szépen, hogy meghallgattak, és most nagyon kérem a boardunkat, nagyon kérem a Board of Members, hogy csatlakozzanak ehhez. Köszönöm.
Oh, thank you very much, Mari, for that important introduction to the history of how we got to this point today. I think right now it's an excellent idea that we be reminded of exactly what the words were of that original manifesto. So we would like to have you come forward here and repeat some of the main points of that original manifesto for us in Hungarian and English. Thank you.
Jó napot kívánok! Most a tolmácsoknak egy kis szünetet adnánk, mert bilingual módon föl fogjuk olvasni, tehát nem kell fordítani, amit elmondtunk, jó? A gondolkodás és a cselekvés új követelményei. A 20. század utolsó éveiben fontos történelmi válaszúthoz érkeztünk. A társadalmi, szellemi és kulturális fejlődés új szakaszának küszöbén állunk. Ez annyira különbözik évszázadunk korábbi évtizedeitől, mint a füves puszták különböztek a barlangoktól, vagy a letelepült falvak a nomád törzsek életétől. Most lépünk túl az első ipari forradalom hajnalán kialakult, és nemzetállamokon nyugvó társadalmakon, és haladunk egy információra épülő, szoros szerkezetű társadalmi, gazdasági és kulturális rend felé, amely az egész földkerekséget behálózza. E fejlődés útja nem könnyű út, tele van drámai fordulatokkal és meglepetésekkel. Századunk már számos megrázkódtatást élt meg, és újabbak is keresztezhetik utunkat. Jövőnket, gyermekeink és unokáink jövőjét azt határozza meg, hogy miként tudunk ezekkel megbirkózni.
In the closing years of the 20th century, we have reached a crucial juncture in our history. We are on the threshold of a new stage of social, spiritual and cultural evolution. A stage that is as different from the stage of the earlier decades of this century at the grasslands from where the caves and settled villages from lives in nomadic tribes. We are evolving out of the nationally based industrial societies that were created at the dawn of the first industrial revolution and heading toward an interconnected, information-based social, economic and cultural system that straddles the globe. The path of this evolution is not smooth. It is filled with shocks and surprises. This century has witnessed several major shockwaves, and others may come our way before long. The way we shall cope with present and future shocks will decide our future and the future of our grandchildren and our children.
A problémákat a maguk összetettségében kell felismernünk, méghozzá nem csak értelmünkkel, hanem teljes empatikus képességünkkel. A racionális értelem hatalmán túl az emberi szellem kimagasló képességei felölelik a szeretet, az együttérzés és a szolidaritás hatalmát. Mindenképpen fel kell használnunk a rendkívüli erőforrásokat, amikor szembesülünk a mai ingatag és sebezhető társadalmi technológiai közösségek következő fejlődési szakaszának feladataival.
We need to perceive the problems in their complex totality and grasp them not only with our reason and intellect, but with all the faculties of our insight and empathy. Beyond the powers of the rational mind, the remarkable faculties of the human spirits embrace the power of love, of compassion, and of solidarity. We must not fail to call upon their remarkable powers when confronting the task of initiating the embracing, multifaceted approaches that could alone enable us to reach the next stage in the evolution of our sophisticated but unstable and vulnerable socio-technological communities.
Alkotó képességre és sokféleségre van szükség. Újfajta gondolkodás nélkül nincs felelősségteljes élet és cselekvés. Ez annyit jelent, hogy fejlesztenünk kell minden egyes ember alkotóképességét a világ minden táján.
A call for creativity and diversity. A new way of thinking has become the necessary condition for responsible living and acting. Evolving, it means fostering creativity in all people, in all parts of the world.
Korunk egy másik követelménye a sokféleség megőrzése. A sokféleség alapvető dolog mind a természetben, mind a művészetben. Egy szimfónia nem állhat egy hangból, és nem játszható el egyetlen hangszeren. Egy festményen sok forma és szín is előfordul, és egy kert akkor szép, ha különféle virágokkal és növényekkel van tele. Egy többsejtű szervezet nem tud életben maradni, ha csak egyfajta sejtekre korlátozódik. Még a szivacsok is szakosodott funkciói sejteket fejlesztenek ki.
Sustained diversity is another requirement of our age. Diversity is basic to all things in nature and in art. A symphony cannot be made out of a tone or even played by one instrument. A painting must have many shapes and perhaps many colors. A garden is more beautiful if it contains flowers and plants of many different kinds.
A kialakuló globális társadalom rendkívül sokszínű volna, ha néhány ország kultúrája és társadalma nem erőltetne kéretlen és nem kívánatos uniformizáltságot az emberekre. Ahogy a monokulturális mezőgazdaság és állattenyésztés fenyegeti a természet változatosságát, úgy veszélyezteti a mai világ sokféleségét is egy vagy néhány kultúra és civilizáció eluralkodása.
The evolving global society would have great diversity were it not for the unwanted and undesirable uniformity introduced through the domination of a handful of cultures and societies. Just as the diversity of nature is threatened by cultivating only one of few varieties of crops and husbanding only a handful of species of animals, so the diversity of today's world is endangered by the domination of one, or at the most a few, varieties of cultures and civilizations.
Egy változatos, de igazságos és egymással kommunikáló világ megteremtése többet kíván tőlünk, mint hogy csak beszéljünk az egyenlőségről, és csak eltűrjük a másságot. Jó indulatú, de ma már nem megfelelő magatartás az, ha másoknak megengedjük, hogy olyanok legyenek, amilyenek lenni akarnak. Addig, amíg a világnak abban a sarkában maradnak, ahol vannak, és megengedni nekik, hogy azt csináljanak, amit akarnak, addig, amíg nem az én házam táján csinálják. A test különböző szerveihez hasonlóan kell a különböző népeknek és kultúráknak együttműködniük, hogy fenntartsák azt a rendszert, amelynek részét alkotják. És ez a rendszer nem más, mint az emberi közösség a maga planetáris otthonában. A 20. század utolsó évtizedében a nemzeteknek és a kultúráknak ki kell fejleszteniük azt az együttérzést és szolidaritást, amely mindannyiunkat képessé tesz arra, hogy túllépjünk a passzív tolerancián, és egymást kiegészítve aktívan dolgozzunk együtt.
Creating a diverse yet equitable and intercommunicating world calls for more than just paying lip service to equality and just tolerating each other's differences. Letting others be what they want as long as they stay in their corner of the world, and letting them do what they want as long as they don't do it in my backyard, as are well-meaning but inadequate attitudes. As the diverse organs in the body, diverse peoples and cultures need to work together to maintain the whole system in which they are a part, a system that in human community in its planetary abode. In the last decade of the 20th century, different nations and cultures must develop the compassion and the solidarity that could enable all of us to go beyond the stance of passive tolerance, to activity, work with and complement one another.
Felelősségvállalásra van szükség. A 20. század folyamán az emberek a világ számos táján tudatára ébredtek annak, hogy jogaik vannak, és hogy azokat ismételten megsértik. Ez fontos előrelépés, de önmagában nem elegendő. Századunk hátralévő éveiben annak a tényezőnek is tudatára kell ébrednünk, amely nélkül sem jogainkat, sem értékeinket hatékonyan megőrizni nem tudjuk. És ez a mi egyéni és kollektív felelősségünk. Nem valószínű, hogy egy békés és együttműködő családot tudunk alkotni, ha csak nem válunk felelősségteljes társadalmi, gazdasági, politikai és kulturális szereplőkké.
A call for responsibility. In the course of the 20th century, any persistent fight is not enough. In the remaining years of the century, our individual and collective family, unless we become responsible social, economic, political and cultural actors.
A mai világban mindenki, függetlenül attól, hogy hol él és mit csinál, felelős a tetteiért, mint magánember, mint egy ország állampolgára, mint az üzleti élet és a gazdaság résztvevője, mint az emberi közösség tagja, mint értelemmel és tudattal rendelkező személy.
In today's world, all people, no matter where they live and what they do, have become responsible for their actions as private individuals, citizens of a country, collaborators in business and the economy, members of the human community, and persons endowed with mind and consciousness.
Planetáris tudatra van szükség. Amennyiben az emberi szellem és tudat nem ölt planetáris méreteket, akkor megerősödnek a globalizált társadalmi természeti rendszer szétfeszítő folyamatok, és olyan megrázkódtatást eredményeznek, amely veszélyeztetheti egy békés és együttműködő globális társadalom felé való átmenet egészét. Ez visszalépést és veszélyt jelenten az emberiség számára. Az emberi szellem és tudat fejlesztése a legelső életbevágó feladat, amelyben az egész emberiségnek részt kell vennie.
A call for planetary consciousness. Unless people's spirit and consciousness evolves to the planetary dimensions, the processes and stress of the globalized society-nature system will intensify and create a shockwave that could jeopardize the entire transition towards a peaceful and cooperative global society. This would be a setback for humanity and a danger for everyone. Evolving human spirit and consciousness is the first vital cause shared by the whole of the human family.
E világban a statikus stabilitás vágyálom, mert az egyetlen állandóság a fenntartható változásban és átalakulásban rejlik. Társadalmaink fejlődését folyamatosan irányítani kell, hogy elkerüljük a sikertelenségeket, és olyan világ felé haladjunk, ahol békében, szabadságban és méltósággal lehet élni. Az ilyenfajta irányítás nem tanároktól vagy iskolákból ered, de még a politikai és üzleti vezetőktől sem, bár ezek elkötelezettsége és szerepe igen fontos. Lényegében és legfőképpen azonban ez személy szerint mindenkitől ered. A planetáris tudattal rendelkező egyén felismeri szerepét a fejlődési folyamatban, és a felismerés világánál felelősségteljesen cselekszik. Saját magunknak kell elkezdenünk tudatunkat planetáris méretekig fejleszteni, mert csak így válhatunk társadalunk megváltoztatásának és átalakításának felelősségteljes és hatékony szereplőivé. A planetáris tudat azt jelenti, hogy felismerjük és átérezzük az emberiség létfontosságú egymásra utaltságát és alapvető egységét, és hogy önként elfogadjuk az ebből származó etikát és étoszt. Ennek kifejlesztése elkerülhetetlen az emberiség számára, ha fenn akar maradni a bolygón.
In our world, static stability is an illusion. The only permanence is sustainable change and transformation. There is a constant need to guide the evolution of our societies as to avoid breakdowns and progress towards a world where all people can live in peace, freedom and dignity. Such guidance does not come from teachers and schools, not even from political and business leaders, though their commitment and role are important. Essentially and crucially, it comes from each person himself and herself. An individual endowed with planetary consciousness recognizes his or her role in the evolutionary process and acts responsibility in light of this perception. Each of us must start with himself or herself to evolve his or her consciousness to this planetary dimension. Only then can we become responsible and effective agents of our society's change and transformation. Planetary consciousness is knowing that all well as the feeling of the vital independence and essential oneness of humankind, and the conscious adoption of the ethics and the ethos that this entails. It's evolution in the new imperative of human survival on this planet.
Thank you both very much. I think it's absolutely clear that the manifesto that was written decades ago has even more resonance today for the situations that we find ourselves in. I didn't introduce myself. I am Jody Jensen. I am from the Institute of Advanced Studies in Kőszegen. I was asked to moderate this session. So now I would like to move to comments from the honorary board members of the Club of Budapest. And the first founding member I would like to ask to speak is Ivan Vitányi.
a világnak. Mint Ulrich mondta, addig az emberi társadalom mindig piramis alakú volt. Ami azt jelenti, hogy alul sokan voltak a szegények, és hatalom nélküliek, és felül kevesen voltak a gazdagok és hatalommal rendelkezők. Most ez megváltozott, hogyha nem is lett egyenlő, de a közepe kihasasodott, kupola formává vált. És ez azt a lehetőséget csillogtatta meg, hogy valami új világ keletkezik, amelyben nem a szűk, felső, hatalmi, gazdag társadalom diktatúrája, tiranniája vagy autokráciája valósul meg, hanem egyre inkább megtelik a közép is, és lefelé halad a demokrácia lehetősége. Úgy látszott, hogy ez most egy új világnak a kezdetét jelenti. 68 után azonban megnyilatkoztak ennek a korlátai, hogy tovább tud-e haladni, vagy megállott, ahol volt. Nem is beszélve arról, hogy hát elmondták, többek között Huntington volt a leghíresebb erről, hogy ez csak ebben a kis részben, Észak-Amerika, Nyugat-Európában, ezen kívül messze világok, külön világok vannak, az arab világ, a dél-amerikai világ, az afrikai világ, és így tovább, amelyekre mindez nem érvényesül, sőt, amelyek istentelen veszélyeket hordanak magában. Ulrich Beck ezt a második modernitás világának nevezte. Benjamin Barber azt írta, hogy itten most két dolog áll szemben, ebben a belső világban, amely a demokráciában van, a McWorld, tehát a McDonald's szellemű középszerűség kezd érvényesülni, miközben a többi világokban a szent dzsihád, a bosszúállásnak a szelleme. És hát ezt leírták a szociológusok. Putnam például leírta, hogy az amerikai fejlődésben ez tovább jutottunk sok mindenen, és többen lettek gazdagok, de viszont elveszett a társias valatartás, ami azelőtt volt. Azelőtt az emberek Amerikában is vasárnaponként összejöttek a kocsmába, a kocsma mellett volt a kuglipálya, és ott kugliztak. Együtt és versenyeztek, és jól érezték magukat. Most egyre inkább szokássá vált, hogy az ember kiment és egyedül kuglizik. Bowling alone, mondta Putnam. Ez lett a új jelszó az emberiség életének. Robert Dahl pedig azt mondta, hogy a demokrácia helyett csak a poliarchia valósult meg. Hogy többfajta irányzat van, többfajta hatalom van, de ezek nem lépnek egymással demokratikus kapcsolatban. Ez volt az idő, amikor előlépett a római klub azzal, hogy erre fölhívja a figyelmet. Felhívja a figyelmet, hogy itten problémák vannak, fenntartható a fejlődés, előre tudunk haladni, vagy pedig ismét belejutunk valamilyen kátyúba. Érdeklődést keltett, de egy viszonylag szűk értelmiségi körben. A római klub utolsó nagyobb gyűlése azt már László Ervin készítette elő, aki akkor már írt arról, hogy hogyan a gondolkodásnak a fejlődése milyen problémákat jelent magában, hogy lehetne egyesíteni a szemben álló gondolati törekvéseket, amit mondjuk mi nálunk hogy idealizmusnak és materializmusnak neveztek, de más nevezések is vannak hozzá. És utolsó gyűlésén a római klubnak Pennsylvániában 1986-ban erről volt szó, az értékekről volt szó. Ervin is tartott rajta előadást, És tekintve, hogy mi Ervinnel már 1944-ben találkoztunk, amikor ő még zongorista akart lenni, és csoda gyerek volt, és nagyon jóban voltunk, mert én meg zenével foglalkoztam szintén. Ő is meghívott, és Pennsylvániában együtt tartottuk az előadást. Ennek azonban nem maradt igazi vízhangja. A társadalom nem figyelt rá. A római klub pedig az emberek lassan kihaltak belőle, meghalt Pecsei is, aki természetesen szintén magyar származású, és nem látszott, hogy mi legyen. Ervinnek ekkor támadt a gondolata, hogy ezt a dolgot folytatni kellene, és meg kellene csinálnunk ennek a folytatását Budapest Klub címen, és gondolkodott rajta, már kezdetben, mielőtt még nem volt meg a Planetary Consciousness kiáltmánya, ugyanebben az irányban haladt, hogy voltaképpen arról van szó, hogy ki kell alakítani egy közös világgondolkodást, amely valamilyen módon meg tud birkózni ezekkel a lehetőségekkel. Azt írta egyik nevezetes irányzata az amerikai szociológiának, a Cultural Studies, azt az alapvető tételt állapította fel, hogy culture plus power equals society. Hogy a társadalom az a kultúrának és a hatalomnak az összetétele. Én azt tenném hozzá, hogy nem pontos, nem culture, kultúra plusz hatalom, hanem hatalom megszorozva a kultúrával. Az jelenti a kibontakozás lehetőségét. És azóta a fejlődés úgy alakult, hogy az a csillogó lehetőség, ami a múlt század közepén a jóléti államban létrejött, amely azt is magában foglalta, hogy egyszerre a társadalom minden politikai irányzata részt vett vele. Az USA-ban a liberálisok valósították meg a jóléti államot. Németországban, mármint Nyugat-Németországban a konzervatívok. Skandináviában a szociáldemokraták. Tehát ez a különbség is eltűnőben volt, mert megvolt a közös alap. Ugyanakkor olyan fejlődések indultak, amelyek ismét felbontották ezt. Megindult az új piramisodosodás. A lehetőségek olyanná váltak, hogy ismét nem a köznép gazdagodása. Azelőtt mondták a képeket, hogy valamikor úgy volt, hogy 20% volt a hatalom csúcsán, 80% lefelé. Ez elérkezett oda, hogy 40%-ból, ezek csak mondjuk körülbelüli számok, 40%-ból körülbelül kijött egy jóléti állam, és 60% volt még a várakozási listán. Most ez a 40% napról napra, évről évre, vagy nem tudom, mit mondjak, időről időre kevesebbé válik, a világ egyre kevesebb részében alakul ki. Lassan azt mondják, hogy a társadalom 2%-a birtokolja a hatalom 80%-át, és 20%-a pedig mindenen fölött van. A legutóbbi mozgó világban Szelényi Iván és Mihály Péter erről közölt egy cikket, hogy történik ez az újragazdagodás. Vagy ahogy Jody Jensen elemezte az Amerikáról szóló könyvében, egy új fogalom van kialakulóban, a forma és a káosz, vagy a rend és a káosz keveredése. Nincs olyan rend, amelyben ne lenne káosz, nincs olyan káosz, amelyben ne lenne rend. Most az egész világ a coordination rendszerében alakul. Úgy látszik, hogy rend van, de voltak éppen káosz. Úgy látszik, hogy káosz van, de voltak éppen rend. Kezünk tehát meg van kötve, állunk, várunk, és nem történik ilyen szempontból jó. Ez most egy új világállapot. Ebben az új világállapotban mondhatnám, hivatkozhatnék Kantra is, aki azt mondta, hogy a társas társiatlanság az emberi társadalom. Most azt mondhatnám, hogy a társiatlan társaság az emberi társadalom. Hogy úgy néz ki, mintha társaságok lennének, de ezek a társaságok belülről társiatlanokká váltak. Mire van szükség? Mindenképpen arra volna szükség, hogy megtanuljuk a közös gondolkodást. László Ervin kitűnő helyzetmagyarázó koncepciójában foglalta össze az emberi gondolkodás fejlődését különböző szakaszaiban, a mitosz, a teosz, a logosz és a holosz szakaszaiban. Az előző szakasz Spinoza óta ugye a logosz volt, hogy gondolkozzunk logikusan. És a filozófia és a tudomány egy logikus gondolkodást teremtett, amely egyik részével megteremtette a nagyipari munkát, és Arisztotelésznek az a jóslata, hogy rabszolgaság akkor szűnik meg, hogyha az orsók maguktól fonnak. No, az orsók hozzákezdtek maguktól fonni, a rabszolgaság megszűnt, mármint a nyilvános, vagyis nyílt rabszolgaság, azonban a rejtett rabszolgaság és függőségnek igen változatos szakaszai épültek ki. Ebben a dologban természetesen cselekedni kell, de a cselekvéshez az szükséges, hogy az emberi gondolkodás változzon meg, és eljussunk arra a gondolatra, hogy meg kell egyezni, hogy a világnak ki kell alakítani azt a közös gondolkodást, amelyben meg tudjuk egymást érteni, szembe tudunk egymással nézni, előre tudunk menni. Mi ezt hirdettük meg. Nem mondhatom, hogy azóta a világ megváltozott volna annak jegyében, ahogy ezt meghintettük. A világ, hogy úgy mondjam, szarik rá. Nehéz a helyzet. Ennek ellenére nem mondhatunk le erről az elvről, mert nincsen más elv, amely ezt meg tudja határozni, amely ezt meg tudja oldani. A válság növekszik, de talán a válság növekedése megteremti azt a lehetőséget, hogy egyre többen gondolkozzanak ezen.
I've known Ivan for 30 years, and he has never disappointed to surprise me with saying something profound and new. I now see that during this talk that Isabella Zwack has arrived, and so Isabella, I would really enjoy to have you come and give a few comments about the event that we are at today.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Angolul vagy magyarul? What would you prefer? I'll go in English then. Apologies for being late. I have a very basic excuse, is that I have a 4-month-old baby at home, and he was hungry this morning. And that is part of the thing I wanted to talk to you about, is that priorities in life become much more clear when you have a baby. Well, at least I've discovered motherhood now, and it's a double. How should I put it? On the one hand side, you want this child to have a better world to live in. So you want to make sure that you fight, contribute, and strive for him to have a better future. On the other, you become terribly selfish, and all you care about is your child, and you think, who cares if the world is going upside down? I'm going to hide away in Tuscany and make sure that he's got good food and let the whole world collapse around me. And of course, this is something we cannot do, obviously. And in times of uncertainty like today, of greater and greater uncertainty, we have a higher and higher responsibility not to hide our heads in the sand. And I am the company of such illustrious minds that I am almost embarrassed talking to you all, because I wonder what can I contribute to this table. And the only thing that I can contribute is my experience in business. We here in Hungary we have a company called Unicum. We make a liqueur, and it's a medium-sized company, but for Hungarian standards considered an important company. And I actually think that part of the way the world can heal is through business. I think companies have a very, very important role in the future of our world, because not so much companies my size, but multinationals have basically become governments, if you think about it. And so the way they do business, the way they make their products, and the way they treat the people who work for them, and the people who work for them, and then people who are going to go and vote, is incredibly important. So I've thought about this a lot through our own company, but I think that once the worker of a company cannot afford to buy for himself the product that the company is making, I think that is when capitalism has turned around on its head. So if one of our workers cannot afford to buy a bottle of Unicum because there's such an incredible wage difference between the worker himself and the owner of the company, then this is quite simply a not sustainable model. And it's particularly sensitive here in Hungary, where wages are much lower than in Western Europe. In other parts of Eastern Europe, they're even lower. Hungary, I think, has lost 600,000 people to emigration just due to wages. We're having difficulty hiring people because people are just going abroad. But basically what I'm trying to say is that I remember very well once I was still at the beginning of my career, and I had a mentor, and I went to a business negotiation, and I got up from the table and I realized that the other person sitting across from me was far too happy. So I thought, this negotiation can't have, I must have left something on the table. He looked too happy, and I was still very ambitious. So I went home and I spoke to this mentor, friend of mine. I said, I think I could have done better. And he said to me, you know what, it's okay to leave something on the table. Never forget that. And I think companies today this is quite simply what they have to do, and it translates into two very, very simple things. We have to make better products. So whatever we're making, we have to leave more quality and more margins, more space in the pipeline. So it means we're not squeezing our producers, we're not squeezing our suppliers so much. So we need to make better products, which are better for our consumers, and we have to pay our workers more. This is which at the end of the day translates into less profits for a company. Now, if I had said this to all of you before the 2008 crisis, they would have said, who is this naive young girl? At the time I was younger. Who is this naive young girl who's saying these very sort of idealistic things? It wasn't cool to say these things in a boardroom. But I've noticed that it's changing a lot, and companies around the world are adopting much more this model, and we're hearing much more the word sustainable business, which has become a bit of a cliche. But I repeat, it's very simple. Companies around the world, helped by their governments, are going to have to make less profits. And those less profits are not going to hopefully go into the pockets of politicians, but going to remain within the company, in their products and in the wages of their employees. So that is my message and my contribution, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. It's an incredible honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabella, for that very personal and I think important contribution about where we go forward and how we define profit now in an absolutely new context. I would like to move now to Attila Barat, another founding member of the Club of Budapest.
Én is kérek engedélyt, hogy itt maradjak.
Please allow me to stay here. It's so nice to be sitting here behind this table. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sitting down here at the far end of the table. Let me start with with how Isabella ended. This is an honor for me to be here, and I'm not sure. I don't remember. I don't think I'm a founding member, actually, but I'm a very enthusiastic member, and I had been a member of the Board of Curators. And as I said earlier to Erwin, when we met, I was a minister, so I was on the side of the power. At the same time, I was shaking when I met him, because I knew his works, I knew Budapest Club, and of course we were in intellectual connection. So let me start with this. We can approach this issue in two ways. One is an optimistic, and the second is a realistic approach. Let me start. I'm happy to start with the optimistic, and I'm sure that the professors will continue along this thought. In Paris last year, when in connection with COP21, the 17 pillars, the 17 objectives of sustainability was adopted, and the 200 other details were adopted, then that was exactly about planetary consciousness. And I believe that the 200 countries that ratified this statement thought that they were serious about it, and they were ready to take the responsibility. And of course there's tools all behind this, and we expect that the developments will be positive. And the professors can talk a lot more about this and know a lot more about this. I'm engaged in one of the committees of the European Commission, and the Treaty of Rome was signed in 1956, and the Treaty of Rome deals with three groups of people: employers, employees, and the third group, like NGOs, institutions, and other representatives, and I'm involved in this third group. 20 years ago, I got an idea from Ivan Vitányi, and one can enjoy what he discussed 20 years ago. The modern world today and the society of today is influenced by two things: interests, and Isabella Zwack covered this, and it was so interesting what she said, and she was much better in discussing this. And interests are economic reasons, of course. These are the drives of development. But from the social side, from the side of society, from the employee side, let's put it this way, values appear, and interests and values always clash. So whatever is decided, it's always about a fight. Is the merit. Who and how can put together this merit, and how, and as the world is going along, it's not in accordance with the metrics. I think that it's the power. The metrics is influenced by the power. So in this regard, there is elements in the manifesto that unfortunately in European reality are not reflected. These are economic problems. So when it was put down that the modern societies after the Industrial Revolution and the national states of nations, the nation states were created, and so I think that in the last few years there is absolutely different directions that the states of Europe have taken. The values and the interests are not in common. So I wonder if they can be harmonized. Well, let's hope that they can be harmonized. The basic issue is the merit, and when we are talking about the values and the interests, I would like to raise your attention to one thing that is connected to economy. Again, we measure everything in GDP, so we measure everything in the production that is created by the economy. This can be a region, a city, a state, or a European unit, whatever it may be. In the last decade, it is more and more discussed what is beyond GDP, what can be the content. And the other day I was listening to a lecture of an American professor who introduced Happy World Index with regards to the countries. There is not one indicator that is accepted and at the same time could reflect the happiness of a given region. So if the GDP reflects the interest, then of course we should put together, define the GDR as well. So the very result, the gross domestic result, what is the realistic result of what has been done?
Let me tell you an extreme example. That of course we know that big economies, how they are increased, the GDPs of these big countries, how much it is increased by war-related economy. Well, let's think about the wars that are going on right now. Let's think about the equipment that is used there, as well as the positive and negative effects of those. So GDR as such, as something that is concentrating only on the human being, on the society, I'm absolutely sure that in this respect, it is something to be measured, to be specified, and we should have a look at what the situation related to it is in modern society. Well, how we can measure it, that's another issue, actually. I think I know less about that. But what is important, and I think this is going to be the end of my speech, is that in the European Union, and by this I mean the way of thinking of the leading organizations of the European Union, the question is what means they are trying to rely on to be able to do this. Knowledge, health, education, everything that impacts men in society the most direct way, that's it. This is what reflects most directly what is drafted in the manifesto as consciousness, culture, education. These are all fundamental for societies to be able to understand each other and to be able to think jointly. There are a number of details that I would like to talk about, of course, but it's absolutely sure that the third side, that is the merit, is something it's very important to be able to have in civil society a drafted, clear place to be able to achieve it. So in Greek society or societies where participation is important, they had certainly their means of achieving it. But in the European joint agreement that was signed in 1956, it certainly clearly contained the need for a way of jointly progressing. And what we can see now, though, is that there is a very quickly developing society, that the European society is mainly an inclusive, clever, bright, smart society. I think even we can say that it's a sustainable one. NGOs have access to information and to be able to decide. However, their ability is rather restricted. There is huge tension within the European Union as for the certain systems. I can give you other figures, but I don't really want to. One of the most developed cultures in the world, Europe. If you have a look at it, in Europe, more than 1/5 of the society lives below the threshold of poverty. And then what we should think about is exactly what Isabella Zwack said, how we could help society be able to have their understanding of merit in line with what the European merits are, and to be able to make use of them. Thank you very much for having the opportunity to speak in front of you, and congratulations to those who worded the manifesto. This is certainly something that will be true in the future as well, and I'm sure that the peaceful situation that we're having in Europe right now, I hope, is not going to be something belonging to the past.
We will now hear Thomas Halm from the Budapest Business School.
Kedves elnök asszony, professzor urak!
Professors, Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. Etele Barát congratulated on the drafting of the manifesto, and I would like to congratulate the organizers of the current conference, because I know how hard it is to organize such an event. And let me tell the guests, the foreign guests we have, that this is an excellent location. Of course, the Club of Budapest holds its conference in Budapest, but it's not only Budapest, but let me mention that this very part of Budapest, that is the Buda Castle, is really important. The head of state moved here, the prime minister is going to move here next year as well, and most ministries are going to follow them as well. Moreover, the very building we are in was built in 1885, when Franz Joseph II was the emperor, who definitely stood up for enlightenment. So for the Club of Budapest, his thoughts and his ideas, concepts about the world are pretty much in line with what we are striving to achieve. Those of you who participate in our work actively, you know that we were first mentioning that December the 31st, 2012 is going to be the end of the world, which luckily didn't happen. But still there are some ideas that such ends of the world will still happen. Today we're celebrating Saint Francis, and he, as a hermit, tried to act as a saint of all missionaries and try to act as a missionary in China. And we know that the message we're trying to give the world certainly is related to what he stood up for. If we look back 20 years in the past, we can't really have a reason for being optimistic. I can't tell you anything that short, as short as what Ivan Vitani said, just 4 letters. All I would like to do is specify some events which we have had in the last 20 years, and things that were definitely not in line with what we worded in the manifesto. And let me also refer back to what Maria Shaghi said about what we should concentrate on. On the southern border of Hungary, what kind of wars we had in the former Yugoslavia. Let's think about Iraq, Afghanistan, 9/11, the Arab Spring, and the negative consequences of it. I'm obviously thinking of right now. Let's think about Syria and the refugee crisis. Since 1996, what has happened in the world, Well, again, let me just mention a few things like the Asian crisis in 1997, Russian crisis in 1998, the dot-com crisis around 2000, another financial crisis, then the Eurozone's as a crisis as well as the debt crisis. So there were a number of events which are absolutely not in line with the spirituality of the manifesto, as well as human rational way of thinking. Well, I would very much be happy to have at least rationality reflected in the humanities way of thinking, although unfortunately few people are rational. Let me refer back to Ivan, who said that very few people concentrate wealth. Those people certainly are very rational, but rationality for the rest of the world unfortunately is very damaging, and it's pretty much dependent on power and power-related interests. I'm afraid I have to say that the majority will buy these irrational ideas of behaving if they are told to do so. And even those who have power in their hands, if you think about writer who wrote about the capital and 21st century and the concentration of wealth and trying to concentrate on the consequences of it, which he expected it to be some kind of a Big Bang, a second Big Bang. And certainly these people think that the principles are unfortunately not the best ones. Let me mention that I think 2016, in my understanding, is the end of the world. The Economist writes that in the history of the United States, the best possible, the most well-prepared, the best prepared president of the United States could have become president, but unfortunately it is not what happened. And if we want to follow the spirit of planetary consciousness, let's think about Al Gore, who was again who again won the vote of popularity vote, but for another quite specific reason, again, could not become president of the United States. How different our lives would be had he been able to become president of the United States instead of George W. Bush. Let me mention Queen Elizabeth II. So it's not only the United States where we had problems. Let's just look at a country which is closer to us, the UK, where they voted for Brexit. In Italy, it seems that in the current days there is going to be another negative event. In France, in Germany, again, what we can expect is certain parties that may become may grab power or may be stronger, which are absolutely not representing rationality. Maria recommended to us to rely on our hearts when we think. I like it a lot, really, but when you listen to your heart, because you're asked to listen to your heart, I'm not sure that the results are going to be the best for everybody. As for planetary consciousness, it is pretty much reflected in the manifesto, which is very much in line with the Catholic Church. And of course, let me only speak about my understanding of it. And let me mention Saint Francis, who says we should be grateful to the Creator for each living creature. And I'm sure that the Pope has his name Francis just because of this. And let me talk to you about evangelization as well. What the Pope stands up for is so successful and it can materialize so well, for example, in the manifesto of the Club of Budapest, because as we can see in Hungary, where there was a vote, a referendum actually, about the refugee crisis, contrary to this very specific result of the vote, this Catholic leader stood up for the opposite, and actually the Archbishop stood up for against what the Pope represents, and they even let some certain magazines and newspapers publish their thoughts. I think the manifesto on the spirit of planetary consciousness is something we definitely badly need. This is a very good way of thinking, but unfortunately what I can see is not in line with the direction of the world. I'm sorry for being so pessimistic. Etele Barat and I talked to each other, and Etele said that as he remembers, bombing in the Second World War, and in 1956 what happened, he had to go down to the basement of the house where he lived, etc. Compared to that, how good the situation is. My understanding is, okay, the situation is good, but I mean, if we think about how good it could be, it is very bad. I mean, if I understand who's the pessimistic and who's the optimistic, well, Etele or me, I don't know. And in the end, let me say that the Club of Budapest signed a manifesto, and I think festo disappeared. It's not many festo, but only money running the world. And unfortunately, I'm very sad, because I think this is exactly what we're going to have in the future as well.
After these panels are finished. Now, moving right along, I would like to ask Sándor Kerekes from the Corvinus University to speak. I know we're behind on the schedule, Mari, but don't worry, we will cut short the coffee break, okay? I'm sure you will all be thrilled with that.
Kedves barátaim, nagy szerencse, hogy...
Friends, I'm so happy that so many things have been mentioned before. It was my turn by the end of the panel session. I think I may be shorter because several things have been said already. So at the university, usually it is said that if something is worth being taught, is critical thinking. And to tell you the truth, I'm trained to try to find the weak points of anything that I read. This manifesto, though, is an extraordinary document, because I can agree with each and every statement and sentence of it, which happens very rarely, because you can find mistakes even in whatever you have written. But the message of this manifesto is pretty much valid even 20 years after it was signed. If there is development, and once we are trying to make it even stronger, that is sustainable development, this is something certainly recurring in our thinking. Lately, I have read professional literature, and I have found a very interesting book by Albert Hirschman called Passion, How to Curb Your Passions. And in that book, he describes how passions of the hunger for desire, hunger for money, and hunger for power. Hunger for power is, of these three, is so strong that if you have this, the other two can be in the background. It was said that this is how capitalism was born. So there's a commercial spirit currently typical of our era. It's better to have people richer, that is other nations richer, for example, because then you can trade with them. From the time when capitalism was born, to me it seems that this is the spirit we have had as the most powerful ruling concept. And I could call it following your self-interest, which is good, because economy was actually serving public good. It's very interesting, when the Club of Rome's first report was issued, then the Nobel Prize was also granted. And I think economic growth is some kind of four-letter word kind of GDP also. But I feel that the problem is not with it or with them, but rather with the issue related to the economic growth serving public good or not. This manifesto, however, specifies why diversity is important, why it is not good to have mainstream ideologies, because then diversity is endangered. Rather than stability, you have a current threat. And there are certain key words that we do not even dare to mention being potentially threatening. So economic growth, which is good for one country, may be bad for another one. If you have to create jobs, maybe the investments, projects, CAPEX is going to be different from what would serve public good. So, for example, we are trying to introduce top technology into the agriculture of India, which then means that 60% of those working in agriculture in other parts of the world will lose their jobs. So there are certainly words that we don't normally question, but let's now play with the idea that competitiveness as such, you hear this word 1,000 times a day at least, and you certainly agree that you have to be competitive. Attila Barat surprised me when he said we should concentrate on the result. What if we talked about not competitiveness, but rather achievement or result? This would be a little bit more complex. It means conquering others. Why would you? Why should you conquer other ones? Stiglitz says that the top 1% lives in the best apartments, their children have the best schooling possible, they have the best health care. For whatever reason, what they cannot buy for money is that they have to live together with the other 99% of society. And how they could live together with the 99% who, for one reason or another, most probably I think because of the 1%, live in destitute, under destitute circumstances. So living together is something that we should try to concentrate on and write. It's not books that we should write about it. I think we should tolerate each other. That's what's important. Me being a tolerant person and tolerating you who are stupid and you commit things that you shouldn't, and I'm tolerant because I'm I'm the good guy. But I could also say something like we like charity, giving money to others, although it's nothing else but, well, I'm wealthy and now I will decide who I'm going to help. And once we're talking about the classics, if we go back to Italy, to the economists of Italy, they mentioned something that we tend to forget about all the time, reciprocity. That if there is an agreement, a contract, so there is the employer and the employee, they're actually entering into an agreement. And that agreement in global market economy doesn't exist anymore. So it's not a labor market when there are 3 billion people lining up for work, 3 billion people in a position like that. So, I mean, like you can make a woman work in Bangladesh for a few dollars a day. Well, in global capitalism, you globalize capital, but you don't globalize the institutional system. We should work on making global capital restricted in one way or another to have some culture, some set of values, like something that is reflected in the manifesto. And I'm really happy to be part of it, although I'm just a very small part of it, but still I hope I'm a part of this system. And thank you very much for listening to my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Sándor. I do not see János Schiffer in the audience, so we will move to János Slavik, who will round up this panel. Thank you.
Tisztelt Hölgyeim és Uraim!
Ladies and gentlemen, Chair, I wanted to show you some slides, but Edwin was very wise to tell me that perhaps human word will be more effective. I've had the same experience. Just think about Jesus and other important people. They didn't need slides to show what they meant. So the university program of the Club of Budapest is something I would like to discuss because I'm from university. I'm a university person. One of the stupidest person is standing in front of you, because even if I calculate the number of years I spent as a student, I think this is my 100th semester, and I'm still at the university. So these are all my experiences are from universities. I've been engaged in the issues put down in the manifesto for quite some time. In the 70s, I was inspired by two things to go along the direction of the science that I was taking, and one was the Club of Rome related materials. I didn't speak English, but I did speak Russian and French, and back then the comrades who didn't have very strong English language skills, they translated, they got some books translated into Hungarian, and also a book from Meadows was translated into Hungarian. A good comrade was one of my bosses, and he gave that book to me. And in the library of the Parliament, there were some copies from the materials of the European Committee, etc. So when I published my PhD, I think one of my references was the works of Ervin László back in the 50s, 70s. There was lots of discussions about different world models among many scientists like Mezárovics, Ervin László, etc. So this was exactly why it is an honor for me to be here. At the university back then, what we usually did, of course that was an existing, the manifesto itself is not a piece of applied science, but the question is how we can introduce, how we can implement what is included in the manifesto. And in some issues we are lagging behind North America and Europe, but with all these environmental issues and with this global thinking, we are not lagging behind very much, because the Clean Water Act was adopted in 1970. It was Nixon. You would have never thought that he would be the one who adopted. And actually 6 years after, in 1976, the same document was adopted. I'm explaining this to you because perhaps you may think that all this started 10 years ago. No. Back then there was an agency and there was a state secretary responsible for this issue in one of the ministries. And now we are at a point that there's a state secretary who is responsible for this issue and 3 other issues. So, for example, how we should protect our special products, Hungarian products like pig salami, and Zwak unicum. So this is something that's positive and appropriate to have, but I'm not sure that the same secretary should deal with all these different issues. So, and this is something you can see at universities as well. Back in the period when the manifesto was adopted by the 90s, back in the 90s, I remember there were some semesters, there were some trainings related to sustainability. And now we are reaching a point where we are going backwards, we are developing backwards. I don't want to be pessimistic. If you want to become an economist or a lawyer, you need to pay a fee for the education. So we are trying to come up with a very strange solution that could be an answer for the requirements of the market. It is a very important issue from the aspect of the manifesto to have the cooperation. I quoted from point 11. and now the translation in Hungarian. Herman Daly said, it's not the mystery of growth that it's a miracle. The mystery is the non-growth, is the not growth. How a human being can stop at the age of 17, 18 or 20 and it's not growing further. And one of the biggest issues in healthcare, one of the biggest problems, is how we could stop non-growth. Of course, this is a world disease, the cancer, and what I can see in society is that some politicians, some influential people, Ettele touched upon it, think that it's positive to have this growth in itself, just for the sake of growth, and that it's quasi like an independent state in a state. It's just growing without a reason, because at the same time it's killing its own organism that it's feeding. So if we adopt a law that to which there is no feasibility study, then of course it's going to override the laws of nature. And at the end of the day, we are looking around with eyes wide open why it's not working. So back in the 90s, when it was adopted, to be honest, I just checked the final version of the manifesto together with the list of people who signed. I don't think there is many documents of this kind that was signed by people like the Dalai Lama and Arpad Gönc and Yehudi Menuhin, etc. So when we thought back in the 90s that we don't have anymore the bipolar status quo and that there's going to be a sustainable world around the corner, and of course the manifesto does not want everything to be grey, but rather to be diverse. There is a heart, there is brain, there is limbs, etc., different organs, and all this work in harmony. The main message of the manifesto is this, I think. So to keep diversity, but at the same time to make sure that all this work in harmony. We understand, and our students understand, they are not stupid, but when they go out to the labor market, they find themselves in a tough situation. So let's hope, may God give us that 40 years from now, where we'll be sitting here, we can discuss much more positive issues. Thank you.
I'll be happy to come back here again in 20 years. And now I have the honor to introduce to you someone who needs no introduction. He's the reason why we are here, celebrating this really unique and remarkable document and the thought that went behind it. So, Ervin, would you come and speak to us now? Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for all this. Thank you for all these excellent contributions that you delivered in connection with the value of manifesto of today. And I'd like to say thank you, Maria, and for the entire company for putting this event together. I'm going to save some time. I'm going to be very brief, but I'm going to talk in English, just to make sure that we speak the common language.
English, nonetheless, so that our international network will have a direct access to the few ideas that I'm trying to bring to you. Up till now, I just thanked everybody for the wonderful event that they've organized here. Ladies and gentlemen, these are critical times. We have reached the edge of a new culture, a new technology, a new epoch on this earth, and at the same time the edge of the precipice. Because if we continue like this, we will be falling into the precipice with all our accomplishments. What we need is something like a new thinking that Einstein said that we all need to solve the problems. New thinking, new way to concentrate the mind. Now, Dr. Johnson supposedly had said, nothing concentrates the mind so wonderfully as the knowledge that you'll be hung in the morning. Now, we need to concentrate the mind, but do we know that we'll be hung in the morning? Most of us suspect that we may be, but we don't know it. And if we ignore the fact that we may be hung in the morning, then we don't concentrate the mind enough, and then we will be hung in the morning. So we have to overcome this circulus viciosus, this chicken and egg situation, and try to concentrate the mind with the knowledge that we could be, but not necessarily be hung in the morning. Why is this situation so critical? We have reached a point which is, in terms of sustainability, can be called unsustainability, a critical point where the world has become unsustainable, not just the human world, the world in which humanity is the basic factor, the world as a totality, as a system in which all parts are influencing, interacting all other parts. And all together, it either survives and evolves and flourishes, or it collapses. We have become a little bit like an elephant in the china shop. We have enormous technological powers. We have created a world in which these powers are employed in a short-sighted, egocentric way, in which they are taking apart the system rather than promoting its integration. This situation is not new, except that it's now global, whereas before it was local and regional. You see, you have humanity here on this planet as one of the species which is hallmarked by the fact that it is led not by its instincts and its genetically coded behavior patterns, but it's led by its thinking, its logic. And this logic may or may not be true to the real state of affairs. Our current behavior is contrary to the state of affairs. I'll tell you why. This world can only survive, as all living systems can only survive, if all its elements cooperate together. All living systems are in a curious state that the Nobel Prize physicist Ilya Prigozhin called systems in the third state. The third state is systems when they are far from equilibrium, far from thermal and chemical equilibrium. This state is possible to stock energy, to use energy, to make use of that flow of energy that comes to us from the sun and which enables life to emerge and to flourish. To maintain our system in that state, we have to constantly concentrate all our resources, all cells, all organ systems in a human body have to cooperate to maintain systems in this far from equilibrium condition. That's a new equilibrium. It's a dynamic equilibrium, not a thermal and a chemical equilibrium. This dynamic equilibrium is one where irreversible processes can occur. They're constantly replaced. Energy is coming to us, it's constantly replaced. So we are in this curious system. All other species are this system, except that all other systems are more built into this biospheric mill of energy, of use of resources, and we are not. We have exempted ourselves. We have believed for the past couple of 100 years that we are not part of the system, we are above it. We are beyond it. The system is now the background. It's nature. It's something that we use for our own purposes. Otherwise, never mind. It's not interesting, no value, no basic value in itself. I'm not talking about poets and philosophers. I'm talking about the way the system operates, the consensus of the Western modern mindset. We have in the past been part of the system. Local area groups, smaller groups, have been as much part of the ecosystem of the world as any group of chimpanzees still is today, or any other living system on this earth. They have grown, however. They have grown into larger size, more and more complex, and they have also began to grow in terms of their mentality, in terms of their thinking. And this thinking about how we think of ourselves, how we think of the world, is what we call consciousness. Our consciousness, as you have heard in the opening talk by Maria Saggi, our consciousness is evolving, has been evolving, but did not keep pace with the evolution of the world around us. We have created an extremely complex system, a very delicate system, where this strange condition, far from thermal and chemical equilibrium, in a dynamic equilibrium, where we constantly maintain ourselves, take in energy, take in information, processes, and use it in this condition, it can only be maintained if we all pull together and maintain the system together. Now, in the past, this was not so critical. We were still tribal groups. We were still operating. Very often, we have destroyed the local environment. In the Middle East, for example, deforested, we made deserts out of what was known as the Fertile Crescent, and that was a local catastrophe. But there was elsewhere where we could go. Now we are no longer a local species. We are a global species. We are populating practically every part of the globe. And what we are doing is no longer being part of that global system. We think we are beyond it. We are taking it apart. Now, the latest insights that we get from the new sciences, especially from quantum physics, which now turned out to be a universal science, not just limited to the super small scale. What we know is that every part of the system is in instant time and space transcending interaction with every other part. No longer possible to act locally. As Gareth Hardin said, you can no longer do just one thing. Whatever you do involves the whole system. In addition to this, we are now realizing that our mind, our consciousness, is not local, that is interactive, and it interacts spontaneously. We have what is known as a non-local mind. And this also new discovery, part of the new paradigm in the sciences, shows that not only what you do, but what you think, the way you look at yourself and the world, has an instant effect on the whole world, actually. It's a total macroscopic quantum system in which we live. And we are dealing with it as though it was a mechanistic system, a kind of a mechanism that we can operate for our own interest locally, the way we want to. And this mentality is dominant in the world and is becoming more and more dominant. The latest developments underscore this. The latest election results, in England, the US situation, Eastern Europe, the whole world actually moving in the direction in which you are reinforcing separatism, isolation, only your own interests. Make XY great. That is going to be now the new hallmark of the politics. That is a way of taking apart a system which is irreducible, which is not takeable apartable, which you cannot simply move apart, so that it really becoming incoherent as a whole. And it's beginning to break down. It is breaking down on the level of social society and culture, with fights, with wars, with killings. It's breaking down on the level of socio-psychology, with irrational acts of violence, people just brandishing guns and shooting. It's in the mentality today. It's reflected in the mentality, because we are today living in a world in which is basically and essentially unsustainable, because we are mistreating it, we are misconceiving it. We are trying to fix it, but if our fixing is still local, then it's a patchwork. If it's still sectional, it's still a patchwork. Nothing else helps here, but this kind of rethinking of what we are, what the system is, how we relate to it. How can we survive in this system? In the past, we were local. In the past, still our inborn intuitions still had a stronger role. Now we are global, and we suppress these intuitions, these instincts, and we say we are going to figure it out, how to do it. And what we want to do it is do our own interest, regardless of the rest. So we are heating up the planet. We are creating extinctions of countless species. And it's only a matter of time before we open the gate to the processes which will lead to the extinction of our own species. This would be a great pity. But I don't want to be just negative. I want to end on a more positive note. What can we do? What we can do is not hopeless. It's not a pie in the sky. What we can do is very real because it's already happening. There's an unparalleled awakening of consciousness in the world, everywhere. New cultures are coming about. New cultures which are recognizing instinctively very often, sometimes explicitly, recognizing that we are indeed part of a total system. We are not just humanity and the rest is so-called nature, which is beyond it all. We are all part of a total web of life, a biosphere, in which we are intrinsically interconnected with all its elements. And only using these interconnections to the benefit of all can bring us forward, can enable us to survive. I mentioned earlier that we are somewhat like an elephant in a china shop. We have created extremely vulnerable situations. We are on the very edge of the thermal balances in the ecology. We are on the very edge of the relationship of species with many extinctions that are coming about. And we are at the very edge of cooperation and relationships between societies. We need to change, and we need to change fast. This change is already happening, and what we need to do is to reinforce it, to be part of it. The choice is, do we want to be part of the problem or part of the solution? So far, humanity, the leading edge, that 2%, or before it was 40% and 20% or 2%, was really the part of the problem, still is the part of the problem. When do we wake up? When will be that critical mass coming about that will change the dynamics of this system? I think it can come about, because the more unstable the system, the more open it is to change. Margaret Mead has said, never doubt the power of a small group of people to change the world. And she added, nothing else ever did. But we have to add one more thing to this saying. A small group of people that's coherent and that's coherently related to other groups. Together we can change the system. Because together we can inject that note of sanity, that note of wisdom, that note of recognition of who we are, so that young people, the new generation, the next generation, not just the baby boomers, but the millennial generation, is recognizing that what they are now embracing as an ethos, which they call the oneness, which they call unconditional love. And this is not just idle, pie in the sky, illusion. This is true. This is the way the system operates. It's the only way it can operate. So being part of this movement, that awakening, is the way beyond the edge. Rethinking, waking up, knowing that we're going to be hung in the morning, but we can still wake up, and then we won't be. The Club of Budapest, I think, it could be an element, an important element of this awakening process. Knowing that we are reaching the edge, that we can get beyond it by developing a new consciousness. Fortunately, 20 years ago, we have already put our thinking, put all our stakes onto this idea of a planetary consciousness. We didn't know at the time how important it is. I think now we begin to realize we either develop a planetary consciousness and hang together, or we have a local consciousness and then we'll all hang separately. I think we have come together here at a critical moment where we can be that critical impetus, that small movement, what the cyberneticians call the initial kick, that can give a movement that particular impetus so that it can grow. I think the world is open to change. We are in a bifurcation process. Nothing is possible other than change. But which change? Change for the worse? A bifurcation that led to a Hitler, or to a Stalin, to a Mao, or to a bifurcation that can lead to a new world of cooperation, a new socio-ecological world in which we are part of a system and we know it and we are consciously a part of that system. That's what I think we mean by a new consciousness, by a new planetary thinking. It's the recipe. We are here. We can be that fluctuation, we can be that input that creates this movement, that gives it, not creates it, gives it a push, because the movement is already there, gives it that critical impetus. So let's get together, and let's be, what we said 2 years ago, change from a think tank to an action tank. And the action is to get together, to reinforce the movement that is already coming about in the world, so that we can leap over that edge of the precipice and reach the edge of a new world, a new civilization. We can do it together. I hope we will do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erwin, for your always inspiring words. This has been a very difficult year for the world, and I want to thank you and also Maria for providing the opportunity for us to come together this year to discuss issues that have really come to a critical point. We need to know that we're not alone, and I think that these meetings are going to be, and these discussions are going to be increasingly important and increasingly essential as we move forward. I want to thank all of the panelists for their contributions this morning. I think that the thoughts that they provoked in me, and I think I can speak for the rest of you, certainly may change the quantum universe, as Erwin was saying. So we are, as I say, a little bit behind, but not too much. So I suggest, if Maria agrees, that we come back together in about 10 to 15 minutes to continue with the second panel. 10 minutes, okay, 10 minutes. And please, would the... 20 minutes, okay, in 20 minutes come back here, and I would please ask the next panel members to come and sit in their places before the panel begins. Thank you all.
Igen, csináljuk. Lógunk a logó előtt.